So my topic for today is the life and ministry of Billy Graham. In the early 1930s, during the culmination of the Great Depression, a young man was working on his father's dairy farm while a group of church members were praying and singing and asking God for help during this time. What they did not know was that these prayers would not only reach the city of Charlotte, but would ignite a fire to preach the gospel inside of a young man's heart by the name of William Franklin Graham Jr., better known as Billy Graham. Billy Graham was one of the greatest evangelists of all time and was considered the most well-known evangelist of the 20th century. From preaching around the world in over 180 countries to reaching millions of people with the gospel, Billy Graham lived a life that should be inspiring to those who learn about the course of his life and ministry. Billy Graham was the most prominent evangelist of the 20th century. I have been inspired by the life and ministry of Billy Graham and love to read about how he impacted many lives around the world. Billy Graham has influenced my life and my ministry since discovering him in the early 2010s. And what we will talk about today is three things. It'll be the early life of Billy Graham. We'll walk through his birth to high school, college, and seminary, Billy Graham's salvation. And second, I'll discuss the early years of ministry for Billy Graham. And finally, I'll discuss the impact of Billy Graham's ministry and the end of his life. During the early years of Billy Graham, we'll start when he was born on November 7th, 1918 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and raised on his father's dairy farm where he grew up working. Billy Graham early on did not live a life of Christ. He did not live for Jesus until later on when we get to his college years. He came to know the Lord in high school during a evangelistic meeting of Mordecai Ham, and Billy Graham heard the gospel and gave his life to the Lord there at that meeting. After graduating high school, Billy Graham attended Bob Jones College for one semester, and he thought that the rules were too strict there, so he transferred after that one semester to the Florida Bible Institute, where he received his calling to preach. Secondly, Billy Graham had a Youth for Christ meeting in Los Angeles, where he impacted hundreds of students for the gospel. Billy Graham preached, and hundreds of students came to know Jesus Christ during that week at the Youth for Christ meeting in Los Angeles. The second thing we'll talk about in this point is the moment that changed Billy Graham's life. Now, Billy Graham was in England when he had the most influential moment in his life. Billy Graham was praying in a hotel room with one of his friends, and one of his friends prayed that Billy Graham would receive the Spirit to preach the gospel. And Billy Graham said that's what changed his life, is when he prayed and asked God to help him with his ministry and with his preaching. And because of that, we saw many people come to know Jesus Christ. Finally, we get to the end of Billy Graham's life and the impact of his ministry. Billy Graham's ministry, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, reached over 180 countries around the world, preaching to millions of people. And Billy Graham reached many, many individuals through his ministry, throughout his life, because he gave his life to Christ and lived for him. And finally, we get to the end of Billy Graham's life. Billy Graham passed away on February 18th, 2018. It was a sad time for one of the heroes of the faith, but Billy Graham lived for the gospel. He left an incredible mark on millions of people, preaching the gospel in over 180 countries. He left a legacy behind that people can look back on and be inspired by. Billy Graham was one of the most influential men in Christianity in modern times and was an advisor to many presidents, athletes, and millions of people who heard him preach behind a pulpit and shared the gospel without shame and regret.